Thanks for attending our presentation. My name is Brian Denham. I'm actually one of the co-founders of Xcelero, along with my colleague here, Karan, who's also a co-founder. We've actually been working together 20 years now, and we started in the Oracle on-premise EBS implementation space, if you can believe that. And about 6 years ago, we got into the cloud, into the NetSuite ecosystem. And obviously seen a lot of changes over the years, so kind of on that topic, Karan's going to talk about just some of the current trends that's going on today in the market, and then he'll touch a little bit upon some things in Xcelero, then he'll hand it back to me to finish off.
To get us started, I'm going to ask you all a question. How many of you do not use Netflix? All right. So I do see a couple of Amazon Prime and Hulu holdouts in the audience, but you're probably wondering, what does Netflix got to do with NetSuite at this point, or are you wasting your time here? So obviously both are cloud applications, NetSuite as well as Netflix, but more importantly, we as a NetSuite customers, Netflix, all of us are in a continuous development environment. And when it comes to continuous development or DevOps, Netflix is known to be a trailblazer, and by some accounts, they have over 100 releases on a daily basis, comparing to twice a year for NetSuite, but obviously you have other releases that happen from time to time. The point of this is, today's world, you are introducing new functionality continuously, and Netflix is a prime example of that. So when it comes to our streaming video service, we are all demanding users of that application, and we get upset if you see an unexpected error pop up on your Netflix screen. But our business users are far more demanding than even in our personal lives. So the question is, how do you deliver to the needs of the business without risking disruption? So we have we know of a customer who ran into some problems because they couldn't invoice customers for a month because an integration did not work. Okay. Then there is also the risk that you take when customizations aren't tested properly. In addition, you have compliance considerations to think about, where not only do you need to prove that you have solid change control, but you also have tested any changes that went into production beforehand. You need to prove to your auditors that you have tested all the changes that went in. Apart from that, there is the business risk to think about, where if you have custom roles, if those roles aren't defined properly, they may have some unintended consequences. We again know of a customer where unauthorized purchase orders were issued, the customer lost several $1,000s, and you're probably aware of some situations like that also. So at this point, I have another question for the audience. So please raise your hands if you find it super easy to have business users come and do their acceptance testing. All right. I was expecting to see one or two, and I wanted to congratulate them, but it's everyone knows that it's extremely challenging to have users perform testing, at least sufficient testing that will make sure that you don't have regression when changes are introduced in your environment. So what all of these questions point to is the need for comprehensive and rigorous testing, which is only possible with automation. So coming back to our Netflix example, Netflix hired dozens of developers and they built an automation framework. They called it the Simian Army, and that's how they test their infrastructure to proactively identify any problems that may arise when the video player shows up on our devices. Now here's the good news. If you want to automate testing in NetSuite, you do not need to hire an army of developers. You don't need a simian army like Netflix does. Because Xcelero can automate testing for you with no need for any developer. Now, when we looked at some industry analyst reports, the common complaint against automated testing tools was that they were hard to deploy. So when we started building Xcelero over 3 years ago, one of our design objectives was to make it as easy to implement as possible. So when you see Xcelero, what you're going to find is that we automatically create test cases for you, we create process flows for you, we make it very easy to define pass-fail criteria at the user interface layer as well as at the data layer. And not only do we execute tests in an automated fashion, you can also schedule execution of those automated tests. Okay? So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Brian to talk more about Xcelero and how Xcelero works.
Thanks, Karan. So really, why Xcelero, and why do you need to do adequate testing? So with Xcelero, or really with any test automation tool, you're really trying to limit the risk of business disruption. So as a NetSuite customer, you're going to have at least 2 changes to your environment every year. But many mature customers have many more changes than that. So Xcelero can balance that risk by not only improving your time to market, but ensuring that your environment stays both stable and compliant to ensure you're delivering quality solutions to the business. I mentioned earlier about being built for NetSuite. So, what does that mean for a testing tool? It means a lot more than just, staying compliant with your 2 upgrades a year for us. So we actually had a customer who owned a generic testing tool, and they wanted to do side-by-side tests with that tool in Xcelero. So they took a number of their sample test cases and compared the time it took in the generic tool. Well, what took 3 weeks in the generic tool took about 4 hours in Xcelero. It's just simply incomparable. As Karan mentioned earlier, when we read a lot of the analyst reports, the common theme was, user adoption was a challenge. So our focus in building Xcelero was to make it as easy as possible to create test cases, build a tool that an analyst can use, where you don't have to be a developer. Again, no coding, no scripting, the test while you rest. This gentleman here is taking a nap. But the reality is, it's not just about saving time on your existing testing, it's about being able to be far more comprehensive in the testing that you do overall as a business, again, so you can deliver solutions with confidence. And fast deployment, same thing, theme on the challenge with a lot of the generic testing tools. Takes a while to develop the test cases, takes a while to deploy. Our goal is to build a tool you could deploy fast in weeks, not months. So save time, save money, stay compliant, avoid business disruption with Xcelero. Here's a couple quotes from some of our customers, and I know even on the next slide they're floating around the conference, so feel free to chew their ear off if you like. But again, like I said on the last slide, it's not just about saving time versus the manual testing they were doing prior to using Xcelero, is that now our clients can do far more comprehensive testing because it's automated. So Mimecast, another example here, they actually did a presentation at SuiteWorld last year, and they were actually one of our early adopter customers. They've got an extremely complex NetSuite environment with lots of variations to their test cases, and we were able to accommodate that in Xcelero and cut their testing down to a fraction of what it was before. Before Xcelero, it was just all hands on deck for the 6 to 8 weeks of the preview instance, and even then they didn't have enough time to do thorough testing. So how do we do it? How does Xcelero work? We break testing down into really 3 simple steps. The capture of your test data, defining your pass-fail criteria, and then executing your tests, as Karan had said. And again, that can be scheduled for further automation. So here's an example again on the theme of trying to make it easy to use, is we've actually built in some auto learning capabilities, and I don't want to go as far as to say it's AI, but it truly is auto learning. So when we install our bundle in your environment, as you can see on the left, if it's big enough, we give you the option of either capturing the latest transaction created. So if you think last sales order, last purchase order, we can auto-capture the data from those transactions to be used for test execution. Now, those transactions might not be representative of what you want to test, so you also have the option of picking a specific transaction as well. So the other way we help you capture test data is actually through our browser extension. So whether it's a standard form, custom form, SuiteWorld, doesn't matter. We can capture the data with Xcelero to be used for test execution. We also give you the ability to export to Excel to manipulate the test cases. And a perfect example of that was Mimecast, which I showed earlier. Now, if you just have a couple of variations on a test case, you can simply edit, make a copy, and now you've got your variation. But if you've got 10, 20, 30, or over 100, in their case, that can be quite tedious. So we give the ability to export to Excel, do your manipulations, and then import back into Xcelero. Really cool feature. We talked about pass-fail criteria, so we give you a couple different ways to define your pass-fail criteria. So we have a user interface level validation. So if you see here, or if you think about a client script, so you can validate data on page load, field change, or before submit. In addition, after you hit save on a transaction, we can actually define pass-fail criteria at the database level using save searches. So if you think about it, we're leveraging standard NetSuite functionality, so the learning curve of that tool is really short. We've talked about testing end-to-end process flows, and one thing we haven't touched upon is the ability to test integrations as well. So integration really just becomes a step in your process. So in this example, integration is simply the first step in this order-to-cash process. This example is an iPass integration. It could be a direct wrestling integration. It doesn't matter. So we're triggering the test of your integrations right from within Xcelero. You do not have to go outside Xcelero to test your integrations. So we're bringing in closed-won opportunities into NetSuite, and then we can test the rest of the downstream fulfillment once it comes into NetSuite. All the transactions, a subset of those transactions, it's really up to you. So testing roles and responsibilities in NetSuite, and we all know how fun roles and responsibilities are in NetSuite. But Karan's example earlier about issuing unauthorized POs, here's a perfect example of how to test that, and you can extrapolate all the other things you can do with this. So in this example, you have on the bottom test an AP clerk, and you want to test whether he or she can issue a PO. Now, shouldn't be able to, or he shouldn't be able to. So what we call that is a negative test, meaning your expected result is that this test is going to fail. So you see we have a fail under the test case status, but we have pass under the criteria. That makes sense. And what's even cooler is on the bottom right-hand corner, we actually capture the permission violation. So our virtual user, which is essentially what Xcelero is we're capturing screenshots along the way. So if you come across an issue and you have to submit a case to NetSuite, now you've got your backup to submit along with your case. Really, really cool. Last but not least, you got to manage your test cases, right? We use simple native NetSuite dashboards, so you can manage your test cases by a BRD, by a specific process, order to cash, procure to pay, or like most of you probably just experienced your 18.1 upgrade, right? So there's multiple ways in which to manage your test case. Very simple, very easy to use. So that's really, all we had today. They only gave us 15 minutes. Sorry, we couldn't show you the live software, but we have a booth that I can literally see from here. If you guys want a personalized demo, feel free to stop by. But I believe we got a few extra minutes, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
So the question was how easy it is to import test cases, and we're happy to show it to you at our booth. But essentially, we have the ability to import test cases from Excel. So you have a test case, you can export the CSV format just like you would import or migrate data into NetSuite. Very similar mechanism to import test case. No, the data doesn't get tested in Excel. It's only a mechanism to create variations of test cases.
Booth number.
So you have a template of, let's say, a purchase order, and you want to create 20 different variations of that purchase order for different vendors, maybe different items, different tax rates, and so on. So what you can do in Excel is to manipulate those rows, copy those rows, change only what you need to, and then when you import it back, instead of having one test case, you have 20 test cases, and then they'll get executed in NetSuite through the virtual user that Brian mentioned.
So we could increase the NetSuite.
The testing happens in NetSuite all the time. So the question is, there's an integration where Salesforce is throwing a bunch of records into NetSuite, and then you want to test the downstream transactions in NetSuite.
There is also activity that happens with Salesforce. Like these two opportunities, so that also testing has to happen in Salesforce and then come down.
So what we can do is to trigger that integration to run, and we have in fact a couple of sessions at the Bhumi Theatre or a day after. But basically we are able to trigger that integration from within Xcelero, where those opportunities that are closed won will come over into NetSuite, and then they would be fulfilled and invoiced and so on. So that's how we can build an end-to-end process flow where there's an integration also.
So I mean, to answer your question, we can test the integration, but we can't test anything in Salesforce, only in NetSuite. I think that's kind of what you're asking. And we have looked at Salesforce. We don't operate in Salesforce yet. So our limit right now is we can test the integration by initiating the integration from Xcelero, pull in, we say close one, but whatever your iPass is bringing over, we'll bring in, or if it's a direct restaurant, we'll bring it in.
So then Salesforce have to do a manual test and then get to a certain stage and then you will do.
That's right. So you'll be staging your transactions in Salesforce. As you saw in the dashboard, that displays essentially reports on test cases that are completed, the various transaction types that you have, how many different test cases you have in a test cycle or a plan, etc. So what's available is a series of reports that are built in, but since Xcelero data is in custom records, you can also add new reports as you need. But there is a dashboard and some saved searches that are available as well.
I think that's it. Thank you, everybody.